Hello, everybody. Welcome to Therapist Take. We're going to talk about the hard realities that healthy, non-codependent couples seem to embrace. So you don't want to miss this. So don't go anywhere. Hi, Carrie.
Hi, Josh.
How are you?
Try not to look at you while you're being silly and make me laugh.
I'm dancing to our music
Uh-huh.
in the
Yeah,
background.
in the background. I can't look or I'll just
Yeah.
burst out laughing.
We need to have Hannah turn the cameras on when we're talking about Dumb and Dumber. Don't you think?
Well, I think we're hilarious. I don't know
we
that
are.
anybody else would think that.
But don't you think we have the same conversation about it
every time?
every time?
Yeah. That's
It's
when you know it's
funny.
good.
Yeah.
It's like my dad and his brothers all do the same Caddyshack lines when they're
Oh,
together.
really?
Yeah.
Caddyshack.
Forever,
Wow.
since I was a kid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's definitely one of those movies that you probably enjoy talking about it more than you do watching it.
Yeah, well, or you don't watch it. You don't sit down and watch it from
Start
beginning to
not
end,
anymore.
right?
Yeah.
You
Well,
just...
I do.
Well, you know what I mean. Like you see
Yeah.
it's on, and you're like, "I love
Yeah,
this
yeah,
part."
nowadays, yeah.
Uh-huh.
Did you ever see Monty Python and the Holy
I
Grail?
love Monty Python.
Yeah,
and
but
the
it's
Holy
also
Grail.
one of those too where it's like when you're sitting down watching
Yeah.
it, it's like, and like it's more fun to talk about.
It's more
and
fun to
just
talk,
quote it,
right?
and
And
things
to
like
look at
that.
scenes,
Yeah.
yeah. Uh-huh.
But I think with Dumb and Dumber though, since we have kids now,
Yes.
I cannot tell you how many times with my boys I'm like, "Hey, Harry, Lloyd,"
Yeah.
you know?
You've had a second pair of gloves this whole time.
Yeah, that's one of
We
those.
have those discussions. We use that a lot. Yeah.
You're right.
Uh-huh.
But anyways, okay, so um, in the last few episodes and of course we had Whitney
Yes.
Alexander on here last time, which is probably, in my opinion, and you haven't seen, and you probably won't. If Carrie was an actress, she would not watch her movies.
Yeah.
I'm
Isn't there a
convinced.
famous actor? There's got to be some famous people that never watched.
Oh, there's a bunch of
themselves, right?
them.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
couldn't name one off the top of my head,
Right.
but you hear it all the time about
Yeah.
people that can't watch their own movies.
Okay.
But in doing the editing of it, and I
Yes.
posted the first half. It is a really good episode, and definitely one of our most vulnerable ones. And you can kind of see it show up from time to time as we're talking. So it's really good. If you guys haven't seen that, go check it out. But we've had probably 3 or 4 episodes of kind of talking about us and just kind of giving people behind the scenes
Right.
take on what it's like being a therapist or what we're thinking in the therapist room. And it's a really fun series, and kind of veered away from kind of the heavy stuff. So we gotta talk a little bit more. This one
Yeah.
isn't so bad, this topic today, but we're venturing
Yeah.
back into the heavy stuff a little bit.
Yeah. To the work we do.
Yeah, basically.
We do challenging stuff.
Yeah, but it was hard for me when I was sitting down, like trying to figure out. Okay, we really need to do kind of a more serious, episode, and I probably started like 3 or 4 outlines on,
What to do.
because I was like, and I'd get like, oh, this would be good. I'm like, I don't want to do that.
Gotten out of the habit,
Right? You're
right?
right. Like just getting, something kind of in between, and I thought this would be a good one.
Yeah,
I think this is something we talk about a lot,
Yes, I agree.
and as you can, people who don't know our process, I basically send Carrie what we're going to do, and as you can probably tell just when you start reading over what I've written, is that these are things that we've had many conversations about.
Yes.
So that's one reason why I'm not worried about broadsiding you. You're
All right. Well, we've worked
so-
together for a long time.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. So before we are going to do the episode breakdown, but before we do that, just want to remind everybody to please subscribe to our channel. This isn't broadcasting on Facebook right now. I'm going to figure out why today, hopefully. But if you're listening to this on the audio platforms, please stop what you're doing for a second. I'm going to pause. Just so you could have had enough time to go and give us that 5-star review, write us something nice if you want. And don't forget to check out the show notes. In the live broadcast right now, I know we actually have a book, and we'll talk about that in just a second, but there is a book already linked. But we will add more links as when I go through the editing process. So, okay. Let's talk about the episode breakdown so you know what's coming. So we're talking today about the hard realities that healthy, non-codependent couples seem to accept and embrace as part of their, their interactions and their dynamic as a couple. And so we are gonna get into that, but we're gonna start with talking about just kind of giving you a different take on codependency in general. I'm going to make a case for codependency to Carrie and see if she disagrees with me or not.
Thumbs up or thumbs down.
I have a feeling you won't completely disagree with me.
Okay.
And then we will end by getting into what we call a path to interdependence. So when we talk about breaking out of codependency, we want to create a relationship that reflects something called interdependence. And we're going to look at these 4 different hard realities that non-codependent couples seem to embrace. They're hard to embrace at first when they're entering into it, but they nonetheless seem to embrace these. So,
Okay.
let's dive
Let's
into
do
it.
it.
Let's get into it. Okay. Let's talk about just real quickly this whole different take on codependency, right?
Yeah.
And I've had many conversations about this too.
Many.
Right. That I think it gets a bad rap.
Codependency.
Yeah. It's it's just, it has that negative connotation to it. And when I'm working with couples, one thing I always tell them is that codependent relationships are a lot of fun in the beginning. When everything's just about you, and it's just there's a shelf life to it, because when your life starts becoming about a lot of other things, and it can't just be about this one thing. Right. You have to divide your attention to those other things, and a codependent relationship doesn't support that very well.
Right. They don't adjust to that, right? Even you think about what the brain looks like when you're falling in love, right? That first 6 months to a year, right? The brain changes, right?
Right. Yeah.
It is, adaptive, and that's not a state though that you can stay at, right? Those neurotransmitters and all of those ways that it's wiring you are something that's changing you, but not something that it's mechanistic in the sense that it's doing something, but it's not going to stay that way, right? And so it feels good, like you said at the beginning, but what happens is that it just can't last, right? And that's why, a lot of relationships don't last past 6 months to a year, right? Because there's reasons for them to have a life cycle.
Everybody's heard of the 7-year itch, right? Like, you kind of wonder. So I don't know how much research has been done on that or anything, but I kind of wonder though if what's happening there is either the couple is, they're breaking out of the codependent relationship and they just can't figure it out, or if the relationship is crying out to them to break free and they're resisting it, basically. So
interesting.
But I don't know. I just, something that's crossed my mind when I hear people talk about the 7-year itch.
Yeah.
It's more like a 10-year itch for me. We won. My wife and I, we went longer than 7 years.
Made it past 7.
Yeah.
Well, what do you mean by codependency has a bad rap? Like, maybe we should just kind of briefly touch on that.
Yeah. I want to reference Rob Weiss's book called Prodependence, which we will put a graphic on screen to show you that. That's actually the book that we have linked already in the description of this episode. And we even interviewed Rob Weiss. I don't know if you remember that years ago when we first started doing live broadcasts. We weren't talking about this book. I think he just come out with it, so I think we kind of promoted it a little bit. But there was another book we wanted to talk about. But I think we had already kind of jumped on this idea of like, hey, this whole codependency thing seems like, God, it's like the worst thing that can happen, right? It's like, oh my gosh, when people realize I'm in a codependent relationship, and like I said, it's like when it's just about you guys, why not, right? But Rob kind of takes he looks at it from kind of an addiction standpoint.
Yes, right.
Particularly, I think a story he tells is the codependent partner of an alcoholic, for example, that might buy her husband beer or alcohol so that he'll drink at home and not drink and drive.
Right,
and
right, right.
and then and there's other types of behaviors like that. And then when they'll get labeled as an enabler and all this
Right.
negative kind of like just
Negative connotation.
unfair labels and stuff that that people put on partners of addicts, for example.
Yeah.
And so that
Yeah.
are basically in codependent relationships. And he's saying like prodependence. Let's acknowledge the goodwill and intent and the very difficult position that these people are in.
Yes,
Right.
yes. I think it's kind of trying to bring some depth and compassion to, that role that we've titled enabling, right?
Yeah.
But typically, I mean, really, when you think codependency, when you just hear that word, I go back to, addiction models,
Right.
right?
Yeah. Sure.
And kind of thinking about how, even early in the days of 12-step work and stuff, there was kind of the idea still of it being a family disease, right? And so if it's a family disease, then the person that has the addiction also has got to have there's got to be other people that are contributing, right? So that's where the kind of that codependent model, meaning that you're both so reliant on each other or each other's behaviors. And I do think it's fair to say, though, that codependency can be quite troublesome.
Sure,
Right.
sure. I think that's I said it's interesting that you said that just now, because I was sitting here thinking, I proudly acknowledge that my wife and I were in a codependent relationship for 10 to 12 years, and the reason I say I proudly acknowledge that is because we did have a lot of fun in the beginning. And it was about 10 or 12 years in when our relationship couldn't sustain that type of dynamic, and but to your point, what I don't have what I didn't live through were some of the devastating effects of codependency.
Sure.
Right? I mean, we don't have an addiction relationship or addiction filled relationship. We went through a lot of when our relationship was breaking out of it. We went through a lot of things that the couples that we work with going through betrayal trauma went through, but we didn't go through a betrayal trauma. So it's a lot easier for me to say I kind of proudly acknowledge that, because in a lot of ways I miss it. I would never go back to it, because there's a level of ignorance you have to operate from no matter what. I think my mic has fallen here. Lift it up here.
Okay.
Here we go. Tighten that baby up. There we go. Okay. Yeah, so I think there is a level of ignorance that is required, and that I'm not crazy about that. And I did through the shift or the transition, I went through my journey of self-discovery, and I would not trade that. Knowing yourself. I don't think we ever know yourself fully, right?
No.
But knowing yourself to some degree of completeness, is something I wouldn't trade for any relationship.
Which means it's not codependent.
I hope not.
Right. Or that's an indicator, right?
Right. Yeah. Do you think that adequately describes? Do you think did we do a good job of explaining why
a codependent relationship is not the goal?
Or no, why just the different take on it gets such a bad rap that we've got to stop being so hard on people.
I think that's the message, right?
Right.
And I think that the work that we do around betrayal trauma has made it its mission, not ours, but all the people who really work in that model of, we're not going to spend a lot of time going, well, you must have contributed to this problem and you got to stop. Instead, it's more of a, tell me about how that came about, right, with compassion and awareness. And I even think just as a citizen, like with the example that Rob gives in Prodependence of I'm grateful that someone will pick up someone who's inebriated
Yeah.
and take them home rather than them get behind a wheel.
Right.
Right. There is something very hopeful about that. And we can acknowledge that. We don't,
Right.
I mean, we can do that and we can
Yeah.
say, maybe that's something that you're tired of doing, right?
Yeah.
We can do both.
And we got to, kind of take a moment to empathize with the idea that
Absolutely.
the difficult position of change that this person's in.
Yes.
Because you're talking about
yes.
breaking out of these relationships is a complete overhaul,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
throws you into a world of uncertainty,
Yeah.
and there's no guarantees,
Right. Right. Right.
So do you care if I try to make this case for you? This
Make
case
it.
Okay.
So,
So I'm not making a case for codependency as like we should strive for this. So I think we just established that
okay.
we don't want codependency. We don't. It's not a sustainable model for a relationship, long term, anyways, a committed relationship. The case I'm making is that I have really thought a lot about this, and I used to say that everybody, our generation and older, probably we're taught to enter into codependent relationships, kind of, like the Jerry Maguire stuff, you complete me and everything. Give yourself over to the other person, and if you really love somebody, you'll make complete self-sacrifice type thing.
Uh-huh.
And I used to say, like, maybe the millennials are changing that a little bit, But as I started to really think about this, as I started to see more millennials that are in codependent relationships, well, maybe
Gen Z.
Gen Z will change.
Maybe the next one.
And then, but when you really think about it, like, how are you supposed to know what interdependence is? Like, when you're a kid and you're growing up in your family, your primary relationship of safety is a dependency. So when you get into that first committed relationship, how are you supposed to know to do it any differently?
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
So I kind of believe that every single person, at least their very first committed relationship, will probably be a codependent relationship. Now, it might vary to degrees,
Okay,
right?
right.
But I think that's true for me and my wife.
So it's also, maybe it varies in degrees, maybe it varies in duration,
Yeah.
right? Because
But I think that's true anyways, right?
I mean, hopefully,
Yeah.
right? And hopefully it's shorter duration than longer, right? Because the more entrenched.
That is something I think that could be different
Okay.
with these new generations.
Okay.
Is that maybe I was actually just working with a client that's fairly young, who's about to get married, and I'm actually impressed with some of the conversations they're having. That I still don't think they're free of codependency.
Yeah.
But I think like breaking free of it sooner.
Not creating the habits and the
Right.
patterns.
Which I think the trauma might be less.
Uh-huh.
The difficulty of breaking out of it, if you can do it sooner than later. Because just like anything
Sure.
else, you get established in your patterns.
Right.
And
Right.
so on and so forth.
Maybe
I
I'm-
interrupted you. I apologize, but
No,
I
I'm
said,
I'm just
you got me
crunching.
excited.
I'm crunching on your thought there a little bit. So maybe it's not some. Maybe it's a phase or a stage or a piece of it. I don't know. Right, but think
Yeah.
about what's happening when you fall in love for the first time. Like, you feel the most like yourself, right? But you also feel the most absorbed into somebody else. It's a weird. Talk
As
about
a middle kid, I'm like, someone finally
finally
sees me.
sees me. I'm the star on the Christmas tree.
Yeah. And then thinking kids came along and she
I
doesn't see
know,
me anymore.
I know, but those kids are so cute. You can't compete.
Yeah.
They're just too cute.
I know.
I know.
But a lot of times it is something like having kids.
Absolutely.
Sometimes I think, unfortunately, but fortunately, but unfortunately, infidelity
Sure.
will break people
Sure.
out of that, or at least give them the opportunity to.
Yeah.
But a lot of people, like, I think they get the opportunity to break out of it, and then they don't. The relationship dissolves, and they enter into the next relationship. And that's where, like, and we're going to talk about some of these things here in just a minute, but like a lot of people that are in codependent relationships that dissolve that relationship and get into the next one, they really do think that ending this relationship will solve my problem.
Yeah.
And I think that is just a telltale sign of a codependent thinker. Like if
Right.
the problem is solved by getting rid of this person or rid of this relationship, then problem solved. Then that
Yeah.
is, my problems are dependent
Right.
on,
The
I
content.
understand my problems as being dependent on this
Yeah.
relationship, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. It's a larger systemic change, probably,
sure,
right?
sure.
And building that know thyself again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you want to dive
Let's do
into?
it. Let's talk about.
These four things and there's probably a lot more, but these are some of the things that we see and talk about all the time,
Right.
in
Right.
consults, and especially as couples therapists, but also as betrayal trauma therapists.
Right. Right.
These are very pronounced because almost every couple that comes through here is having to deal with these,
Some version
right?
of this.
Some
Yeah.
version of this. So the first one that we're going to talk about, and so this is, a hard reality that codependent or non-codependent couples, healthy couples, seem to embrace. And one thing I wanted to mention earlier too is that I was even reluctant to put the word healthy
I know.
in the title as if non-codependency equals healthy.
I know. Right. Right.
Right,
Right.
because it's like I said, I think a codependent relationship can be a lot of fun in the beginning, so it's not necessarily unhealthy. It's just not going to stand the test of time.
Right. Right. Right.
Right. So
Well, and I
on
think
that
just
note.
to kind of, even before we talk about these, to kind of piggyback off of what you're saying about the title, like even these four realities as they've been labeled, they're supposed to be challenging. So if you hear them and you're like, I disagree, great.
Right. Yeah.
Right, great, because
Yeah.
now there's critical thinking around these. Maybe there's just a different perspective. Maybe there's only a tiny shift, right?
Right.
But again, that's kind of the point about thinking deeply and critically, right? Is
Yeah.
to grow and stretch or
Absolutely.
explore.
Right. And so I'm going to repeat myself because I might cut that section and move it
Okay.
to the front. But so what we're getting into now, in talking about these hard realities that non-codependent couples or couples that are pursuing interdependence, these are realities that they seem to accept and embrace.
Okay.
And it's hard, but it seems to work most of the time anyways.
Do we want to talk about what interdependence is? You want to define or distinguish that?
We probably should, right?
I think it'd be nice.
I'll go for it, Carrie.
Well, interdependence means kind of a balance between separateness and togetherness, right? And so there's some overlap, right? There's some
Right.
joint ventures. There's some reality that what's happening with one is going to, like a scale, affect the other side, right? But there's also enough separateness and individuation, right? Your own identity, your
Yeah.
own interests, right? That you can have a distinction and a boundary between
Sure.
this. These are, Josh and I, or really all of us at our practice, really talk about when people come in to work with us, we're thinking about three entities, right? We're thinking about each individual and the relationship, right? And interdependence kind of looks like that Venn diagram, right? You've got
Right.
this person, and then the relationship, right? And there's overlap in all of them, but there is some separateness as well.
Sure. And just for people to kind of, I don't have a picture to put on the screen, but I'll try to paint a visual for people to understand this.
Okay.
Because I always think of it's something that you see in just about every marriage seminar that's ever been done. You see the overlapping wedding rings, right?
Yep.
And when you think of the overlapping wedding rings, if you think of the rings by themselves, apart from each other, that's independence, right?
Okay, good.
And with codependency, it's like they're just stacked right on top of each other, and so there are two rings there, but it is kind of hard to distinguish where one ends and the other begins.
Right.
You don't really see the individuals anymore. They kind of been absorbed into the relationship, right? And interdependence is what you see at the marriage seminar, the overlapping rings, where you can still see that there are two individuals, but the overlap represents the relationship. So the individuals don't get lost in the relationship. It's just they're a part of it.
Right.
And So the whole process of going from independent to codependent to interdependent can be daunting a little
Yes,
bit.
can be exhausting.
And yeah, it's tough.
Yeah, sure.
So anybody who's gone through that knows exactly what I'm talking about. So
Yep. Yep.
all right. So the first hard reality that we're going to talk about is that the first hard reality that interdependent couples embrace is that they operate from a want-based relationship instead of a need-based relationship. And so the quote I have on the slide says, "It's not my job to meet your needs." So where am I going with that, do you think?
Yeah, it's the individual's job to meet the individual needs
Right.
and or to make their needs slash wants known, right? But at the end of the day, the buck stops with
Yeah.
the individual.
So I like how you said that when you're like needs slash wants, because that's when people usually say meeting my needs, they're talking about their wants, but we couch it in this
We do.
word need.
Right, right. And what's that about?
I think fear,
Okay.
like I like it. It feels better to me if it's something I need, because how could you deprive me of something I
Right.
need? I will die if you don't provide this to me, and so it kind of is a language that locks us in.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. To an obligation.
Yeah, I'm required.
Right. You signed up for this.
Yeah. Oh, how many people say,
A
I didn't sign
lot.
up for this?
A lot, a lot.
I was like,
Yeah.
I didn't know there was a sign up sheet.
I wouldn't have put my name on
I
that
know.
one.
I'm like,
Yeah.
I mean, we just got married. I
Right.
don't remember there being a sign up sheet.
Right, right.
But want is much more vulnerable.
It's much more vulnerable. And I think also sometimes, I even think my real go-getters will use the word need instead of want, because if it's a need, it seems anchored. It seems reasonable. It seems important. If it's a want, it could seem frivolous
Well,
or unnecessary, right? And if you're saying it this way because you have felt like you aren't acknowledged, then if I use language need,
Yeah.
it's got
Yeah.
some meat to it,
Yeah,
right?
it's got some hooks.
Yeah.
That's how you get your hooks
That's
in
how you
me.
get your hooks.
But it in a way it isn't necessary. I think that's what makes it so special. Like if you're to be wanted, it feels much more intimate than to
Absolutely.
be needed.
Right.
How
How many times do you like, yay, my friends have to see me?
right? All the time.
I locked them in and they're obligated now, right?
And I'm okay with it. When you're a kid, you are okay with that. You're like, I'm okay with that. I don't care why.
I know.
I just want you here.
Just want us to hang out.
Right, but yeah, it's the fear though is that, well, let me say it this way, like if you need me, I mean, if I need you, then you have to meet my needs, then there's really nothing to fear, but if I want you or I want you to want me, oh wait, you can unwant me
That's right.
then,
Right.
and I don't like that.
Yeah.
But that's the risk of the relationship. That's what makes when it works out and you're experiencing the feeling of being wanted and it feels really good. Like that's what makes it feel so good, is because the other person, they don't have to do
Right.
that.
Right. That's what makes it special.
Right. Yeah. So I think it's a much more intimate relationship. It's more special.
More vulnerable.
And as we've said for years, that vulnerability is the key, is the heart of the relationship, and so it's hard to do, but I do think, interdependent or non-codependent couples, they really start to embrace this idea that it's my job to meet my needs.
Yeah.
And as part of that, like I have certain wants that I still might require this. This might be a really important piece to my happiness formula.
Sure.
But so I have to communicate the importance of it. Now, if you're not willing to provide that, I don't need you to provide it. I want you to. But if you don't want to, that could affect
Right.
my desire to be in this relationship.
Sure.
And
Sure.
so let's use a different example real quickly. Like one thing I talk about with couples, especially people who don't feel safe in a relationship with somebody else, and I'm talking about emotional safety, not physical safety.
Okay.
It does apply a little bit to physical safety, but there's such a different psychological phenomenon going on here.
Yeah.
But when we're grown ups, like, it's my job to feel safe in my life. It's not your job to make me feel safe. It's my job to feel safe. And then if something unsafe enters into my space, I have a responsibility to take action to honor my sense of safety, right? You agree or disagree?
Sure. Yeah.
So even when it comes to, I need you to be a safe person. No, you don't. You need to be a safe person for yourself so that you know how to handle something that feels unsafe. And if that person isn't willing to adhere to your unique flavor of safety,
Sure.
then you might have to decide to not be in that relationship.
Right.
You know.
Sure. But
And
again,
that's what people are afraid of.
that's what they're going to say. That's what this
Right.
all is, right? Is that if you start shifting language to want, then there's always been risk. It's just now more clear to you, right? And that's again, we all like to live life a little bit with blinders, right?
Yeah, and it is, we were talking about uncertainty earlier. Need creates the illusion of certainty.
Certainty and
right?
clarity,
And
yeah.
want reveals the reality of uncertainty.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Okay.
Okay.
So how do we do, people? Did we explain that well? Or
So
sometimes, do you ever start talking and you feel like, it makes sense to me? But
I know. Well, I
is it
ask my
word
clients
salad
that
for everybody
sometimes.
else?
I know. Did you get that? Did you hear my message?
Right.
Yeah.
You just squinting. Does that
I
make
know,
sense?
squinting, because that'll make the message
Yeah.
clear.
And then your clients are going, oh yeah, that makes sense. And deep down they're like, oh, it makes no sense. I don't know what they
I
just
don't
said.
know. I wasn't listening anyways.
Okay. All right. A second principle, or kind of, what word did I use earlier? Hard reality.
Hard reality.
Yeah. The second hard reality that interdependent couples tend to embrace is that unconditional often means unaccountable. And so the quote that we put on screen says, there's no such thing as unconditional love or unconditional commitment in a healthy couple relationship.
Boy, talk about this being hard, right? To watch couples when we
People are
challenge
cringing
that.
right now hearing
And
that.
yeah. The way I say it is oftentimes that unconditional love only exists from parent to child. That's the only relationship that I think human relationship that's where that resides, right? It doesn't even reside from parent or from child to parent, right? It's one directional.
You're right.
Right? And
Yeah.
so but if we've been fortunate and we've had a healthy attachment with a primary caregiver, and we felt safe and loved and protected and important enough, then we're going to enter into our romantic relationships, right? And we may even have some version of, but I should feel unconditionally loved by this person all the time, right? And I think it's important to say, that's really, the good news is it's not necessary to have a healthy long-term couple relationship, right? You don't have to have unconditional love.
No.
You don't have to give unconditional
In fact,
love.
I think it's
I think we're
less
saying you
likely,
shouldn't, but I think it's kind of I don't know, it could be a burden lifted off your shoulders.
right. I think you're more likely to have the long-term relationship you want when you understand.
When you understand
this.
that every the way we say it, and we've heard it said many times in our offices, right? Is everybody has a limit.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and sometimes it needs to be their threshold of tolerance is way too far.
Right.
Like they need to bring it back some.
Yeah.
But and I agree with everything you just said. I do think that unconditional. What I always say is unconditional love. The feeling can exist between two people. That's why. How many times have we heard someone say in our session, in our counseling sessions, say, this would just be a lot easier if I didn't love them.
Oh yeah, we
right?
hear that a lot.
And so even in some of the worst of situations, it's unconditional love, the feeling, the attachment that has brought me here.
Yeah.
But love, the verb, which we think of a marriage or a committed relationship as an exchange, not right. It's what's happening between two people, right? And so the verb, the exchange, it's give and take.
Yeah.
And if I don't feel safe enough to give or even to receive, it's going to be a problem, right?
Yeah.
And so when couples go along excuse me, sorry. When couples go along with the unconditional love model, or they might say, I've heard recently, like unconditional commitment, which is still kind of the same thing, in my opinion. There's no accountability now. You're removing accountability because the reality of loss needs to be present. And when we talk about bringing the threshold back, how many people have we seen that they don't take action until their relationship's just hanging on by a thread because they've tolerated and tolerated and tolerated because my job, I made a commitment, I made a vow through sickness and health, through good times and bad. And I don't necessarily think that vow means that you have to be a punching bag or a pincushion because
there must be accountability.
There has to be.
Yeah.
And there's no account if we're going through a relationship and I have no worry at all that you might leave me for any reason. Like, think about what that opens the door up to. Well, as long as I don't cheat on her, I'm good. I'm sorry, we need to have higher standards.
Well, it invites bare minimum. Right?
Well, that's a great way to put it.
I just don't. Again, we're talking about healthy things. Like we're talking about things that you want and things that you're willing to work for. And I don't know that. Oh, I can't wait till I can bare minimum that.
Right. Yeah.
It's not there. And I think, remember, accountability doesn't mean that we're saying love must be earned only.
Right.
Right.
No. Yeah. I agree.
We can give love and have expectations, right? And the healthiest couples understand this. Like, each person understands, like, oh yeah, I've got to, my words and actions must match. Like, I get that. They understand accountability is built into what makes the relationship a healthy, safe, place to grow.
Right. So something I just thought of that I didn't think of till just now. Did you see it? They flicker.
No, they move. Yeah.
Do you remember on Men in Black when the guy's eyes
I didn't do them.
blinked? That would be cool. My pupils blinked.
I'll start paying closer attention.
So I do think like there is one other relationship where unconditional love can and should exist.
Okay.
And that's with self.
Oh.
Right? Can you love yourself enough to speak up, to say something, and and I think people who abandon the unconditional, love thing with committed relationships, I think they do that much better because they recognize, like, to really be an effective partner, I have to love myself first, and so when we talk about like the give and take, I always think of, like, in a codependent relationship, it's like you're underwater sharing the same the same air tube, one tank and a tube that feeds it, and then if the line gets kinked, right, and that's all you have for air is that one, I mean, you're in a pickle.
You're both in a pickle.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it is. And so you can see how, like, I'm freaking out because this is my only source of air. It's my only source of love. And it's my only source of feel good.
Yes.
But if I have a reserve that's just mine, I use it when I need it, and that line gets kinked, I'm not freaking out. I need to unkink it. I don't want to use all my reserve.
Yeah.
But I can approach that with Just from a stronger sense of self and a place of maturity, and not feel like my whole world's about to go under, right? Fall apart, yeah.
Yeah. I think
Number
we
three?
did that one.
Yeah.
All right, yeah, you read this one.
People can comment if you think we're not explaining it well. Please tell us. We'd be
Right.
happy to clarify. So, all right, the third one is that compromises are seeds of resentment. So, here, the quote I have on here says, in a marriage, if one person wins and the other loses, the marriage loses every time. Because we often think of compromises as like, I'm going to give you what you want. I'm going to compromise, and like, I'm going to give up what I want so you can have what you want. Right? And you can hear the resentment starting, right? Okay.
Give it to you.
Right? So we always know what this looks like is years down the road. It's like, remember when I did that thing for you? I think Hal Runkle talks about this in the book Scream Free Parenting, when he talks about parents that shouldn't make compromises. But one thing I've thought about is like, where else? We hear people say this all the time. Like, if you're going to have a healthy relationship, you're going to have to make compromises.
Sure.
And I'm like, as a therapist, I'm like, no, you don't.
So what do you do? Because someone's going to want Chinese and someone's going to want Mexican food, right? So what do you do?
Both. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to come back to that.
Okay.
The first thing I have people think about, though, is where else in the world or in the English language or whatever that we use the word compromise in a positive way, except when we're talking about marriage. I mean, I'm like, do you want your accountant to be compromised?
No.
If you're in the military and they're like, hey, your position is being compromised, are you going, great?
No.
I'm going to have a good relationship with the enemy here.
But in politics.
I thought about that too. I've covered all the angles, Carrie.
Okay, good.
They never get what they want.
Right.
They're never
And
happy
both sides
with what they
gave
get.
something up.
Right.
Right.
I mean, it might be necessary for the political system to work the way it works, but I don't ever see politicians thrilled about the bills
What
that they're
they gave up.
Yeah, I mean, because they're happy with some of the things they got, but they're not really
wanted
getting
all
what
of
they
it.
want. And so, but I also don't think it's good in relationships either, because I actually think compromise is what couples are doing that leads them to us. Is because in what they've compromised are their values and their principles, and the self. Where did I go? Like I used to not be like this, and I used to be happy. I used to be joyful. I used
Decisive,
to like,
whatever.
right, and you compromise, and so healthy non-codependent / interdependent couples, they go with the both and scenario. Am I still in the right one? Yeah. Just make sure I was in the right category here. It's not either or for them. Like either you get what you want or I get what I want. It's like it's a both and thing. We got to figure out. So now we're back to your question.
Yes. Right.
I'm going to put it back on you.
Okay.
What do you do? Like, we want Chinese food tonight or Mexican food? Who's going to get what they want?
Yeah. Well, when it's my kids, I say we'll get this one tonight and that one next time.
Yeah. It'd be nice if there was somebody to do if we had a mediator for our marriages. Like we go to our marriage counselor and say, look, we can't figure out what to eat tonight. He just tell us, pick one.
Yeah. Well, there are strategies for that, right?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Fun story here. When my wife and I, when we had our first baby, who is now going to be a senior in high school. When we this is back in the day where we didn't have streaming and we had to watch our DVDs.
Oh yes.
And we have a whole bunch of DVDs and to choose. And we're like, what movie we want to watch tonight? And then we would pick like 3 movies a piece, right? Then we'd go through this whole veto process where we would come down to the final 2, and then we'd put the final 2 on the floor. And whichever one Kason crawled to and put and got is the one we watched.
That's so cute. Yeah. That's a great way to do it. That's
but
cute.
You know why that's not? To me, that fits with that's not a compromise.
because
we agreed on the
we win.
system for choice. Like
Yeah.
we agreed on how we would do this. And what happens when people are compromising is people don't want to go through the headache.
Well, yes,
Because
I
it's a
agree.
headache sometimes.
It's a headache, but I also think that sometimes compromise happens when there isn't a system.
Yeah.
Right. So
Well,
again,
100%.
think about trauma. Trauma,
Yeah.
there's no system, right? Everything's been blown
Right.
up by trauma. And so compromise starts to happen because you don't know what else to do.
Yeah.
Right.
No, I actually think that's probably 90% of the time what you said is
what's happening.
It's creating the system that people don't want to do.
Right.
You know,
That's
because
why the
that's
strategy
headache.
about restaurants is put them in a hat and draw them.
Right. Yeah.
No, that's
that's a good
every
one.
marriage
Yeah.
seminar you go to. That's how it is, right?
Yeah, but what they're doing is introducing a system
right.
that we both have agreed to,
right.
and then now, so think about how this prevents resentment.
Right.
If you're like, man, I really don't want Chinese food, but I went ahead and went along with a system
Because
that
I agreed to
allows
the
for
system,
it.
right.
Like I don't. I'm like, if Chinese food gets chosen, I mean, like, oh, this was a bad idea. I'm not blaming my partner for it. I might be thinking, you know, I may should have spoken up and asked to remove that one completely.
Right.
You know,
Right.
but this is the system I agreed to.
Right.
And so I'm not blaming my partner.
Right.
So I don't resent them later.
Well,
on.
and I think this is also where you could hear if you have a system and you're using the system, but there's still resentment. Now we're talking about something else, right? Now we're talking perhaps about deeper relational issues, right?
Yeah.
But today we're talking about what couples have, healthy adaptive couples have agreed to, interdependence, which they've agreed to the system, and embedded in the system is sometimes one person gets their preference, sometimes the other person gets their preference, but the relationship wins because the system supports the relationship.
Right. And I'm going to address that too. First thing I like to let people know too is, like, to me, I like to think of, like, whether you're thinking of this from an evolutionary perspective or from a religious perspective, that all our feelings that we have a valuable purpose and function for us. So what is the function of resentment? And to me, it's there to let you know you are holding on to something.
Yeah.
You need to speak up. I correlate it with, like, being thirsty. When you're thirsty, you're like, oh, I'm parched. You know, you're licking your lips like I am right now.
Now that we're thinking about it, yeah.
You're already dehydrated. You know, and speaking of my oldest son, you know, I always think of him. He always has a water bottle with him. He's always nursing it. Like, I don't know if that kid's ever felt thirsty. You know, because he's not letting himself get dehydrated.
He just always has it available.
Right. So resentment is like the emotional equivalent to that thirst. It's like you really don't want to let yourself get to that point before you speak up. But if you do, the relationship's going to let you know through this. But what couples often do is they come in and say, hey, Carrie, I'm really resenting my partner, and they've already identified the feeling and everything. Would you help them not do this thing so I don't resent them anymore? Right?
Sure.
And then we're like, you know, it's actually your job to not resent your partner.
A grown up, it's not your job.
Yeah, so you got to do the thing that which usually involves some form of speaking up.
It does, because this is again, in healthy relationships, your yes means yes and your no means no. You can't say yes and inside be saying no. That's just not fair.
Right.
It's not going to work, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And one more thing on this point too is that when you're when you're trying to decide on your system, you're like, this is what I want, right? This is what you say. This is what I want. This is what you want. You know, but when I'm talking about what I want, then my brain is going to create an image of what that might look like.
Okay.
And sometimes we get the image confused with what we actually want, with the spirit of what we want. All we have to do in a healthy relationship for us both to win is to capture the spirit of what we want. You know, so I don't need it to look exactly like I imagined, in other words. And if you get fixated on your imagination, I must have it that way. Now you're being too rigid. So sacrifices are made
Sacrifice, right?
in relationship, but it's sacrifice. If you sacrifice too much, now you're becoming self-sacrificial, and that's
Right.
usually when compromises are made.
Yeah,
So
sure.
you can make sacrifices without being self-sacrificial.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry, I wanted to say that last
Okay,
piece on
good. You just wanted to give a tongue twister.
there. Yeah.
All right, let's talk
That's all
about
you
the
wanna
last
know.
one too, because it's another one that can be a little bit interesting to think about.
Yeah, this one's hard. I mean, these are all kind
They're all a little
of
bit
hard.
challenging. Yeah.
Even if people intellectually understand these, emotionally, it's really difficult. All right, I think this one's still difficult for me in a lot of ways, but I'm definitely much better at it. But happiness being valued above togetherness, and the quote I have on there is valuing happiness over togetherness gives me the best chance of having both.
Yeah. Yeah. This is hard, right? I mean, I think this is I think this is somewhat of a developmental milestone in long-term relationships, right? Again, kind of to go back to what we talked about earlier in codependence. You know, when you're first getting together and you're falling in love, you want to be together all the time. I mean, you're driven, right? Your dopamine is just coursing through, and you're driven to get things done, right? I'm going
Right.
to work really hard and get my work done so I can see you, right? I'm going to, I don't need to eat. I want to get to see you quicker, right?
Right.
Okay, makes sense. But long term, you're going to have to go to work, and long term, you're going to have to eat, and long term, you know, your friendships require attention and time too, right? So there has to become this shift of, you know what actually makes me a happier person, more balanced person, is when I get enough rest.
Yeah.
It's when I get to go see my friends. It's when I feel like I did my best at my, you know, whatever tasks are in front of me. That actually is when I'm at my best, which means that I'm at best in this relationship. That all, again, intellectually makes sense, and people would agree when we put it on paper, but it can be
Right.
hard to put into practice, right? Am I going to feel better and be better at this if I do what's good for me at the cost of our relationship?
Yeah.
Or what can maybe feel like at the cost of our relationship?
Right. Yeah. And too, like when this is new to the relationship,
Yes.
it can feel like abandonment
It
to
feels
the other
like
person.
abandonment. It feels
Yeah.
like you pulled the wool over my eyes.
Yeah.
I didn't
You
think
lied
it was
to
gonna,
me.
right. You lied. I didn't think it was gonna be like this.
right.
This isn't what I signed up for.
It's come up twice,
Again.
Carrie.
But
Yeah.
but I think that's, and I agree.
Carrie, I kind of feel like there's something you didn't sign up for.
Podcast.
I know. That's what I was
I
thinking.
know. I'm saying it out
When we
loud
did
for
this.
I know.
You're like,
Yeah,
"I
he
didn't sign
just
up
keeps
for this."
roping me along.
When Carrie's saying it, she's doing her eyes real big. There's something I didn't sign up
Josh.
for.
I know.
This podcast. Yeah.
Happiness, togetherness. Let me think about this.
Yeah.
But what does it mean to you when you think about this? Like,
That
what
you
does
did this
look-
podcast, it means the world to me, Carrie.
Thanks,
I cannot tell you
Josh.
how much.
Thanks, Josh.
No, I think about the accountability that's created
Yeah.
when you do this.
I
Like when
know.
I'm evaluating happiness over togetherness. Now I want to be happy together,
Yeah.
but I don't have to be. I can be happy alone too. I just want to be happy. And so now the relationship has accountability, because if I'm in a relationship with somebody else who operates the same way,
Right.
I know that,
Right.
now I know I matter, but now I also know what I do matters or what I don't do.
Or what I do.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, but it's scary, because I know personally, I do not want to lose my wife. I do not, and, but I also, more so than I ever have in my life, feel like I'd be okay if I did, and there's this actually from a session that I had with a client he kind of misunderstood this whole idea, and he comes back into session one day and he's like, he basically really tried to embrace this idea of not, of not valuing togetherness, like value my happiness. And he went home and he was kind of a jerk, I think. And I said, I was like, this does not mean you are no longer vulnerable, because it was almost like he didn't care anymore.
Right.
Like, that's what he tried to do. Obviously, he did.
Didn't work. Right.
He was really trying, and so I came up with this quote that I say, when you truly want your partner, you position yourself for a broken heart. But when you desperately need your partner, you position yourself for a broken life. And that's way too much power to give any one individual.
That's good.
So now we're back on the need-based versus want-based, right? And so we're not saying that a person who values happiness over togetherness wouldn't be devastated.
Absolutely.
If their partner came to them and said they wanted out of the relationship, and that there wouldn't be a grieving process. But they know they'd be okay, and they also too would be the ones to take a stand, to not let things go and not to let things slide. And there's another expression I say where I say people are like, people in codependent relationships, you'll often hear them say like, why are you making a big deal out of this? Like, you're making a mountain out of a molehill. And to challenge that perspective, I'll often fire back, say, you better be making mountains out of molehills, because the molehills might become mountains. You know, it's like, at least you probably need to make it a bigger deal so it doesn't become a huge deal.
Which means you tend to it.
In codependent relationships, they don't do that, because they're like, it's no big deal. Why do I want to disrupt the system? Right. Togetherness matters.
Right, more than that.
Right. And
I just want to caveat to you, we're not saying happiness in the sense of like material possessions or ecstasy and joy. Yeah. We're talking about happiness kind of in a synonym for peace, right? And authenticity, right? Yeah. I mean, I think those things are all kind of going together. And so if you need to, know thyself, knowing what makes you feel like it's a life worth living, right? And relationships are typically what most people think is the primary point of this existence, right? But it's not the only, right? And so having a life that's full of happiness and meaning, peace, I think it's really essential that is what you're aiming for, and not just targeting the relationship.
So we know that these are really challenging concepts, or in a lot of ways counter-cultural, at least counter-normative, in terms of how we've understood or been taught about relationships, at least from my experience. So I am, we are interested in, what anybody who's listening to this or watching this might think about some of the things that we're talking about. Like, if you agree, do you disagree, or do you need to think on it? Did we explain ourselves well, or do you need more explanation? Sure. But I will say this, like, and I'm not saying that, some of the concepts that we kind of work through and we team up on are the poster child to mental health or relational health. But I can't tell you how many times people come in as they are working through this process, and they say, I get it. In the beginning, I thought you were nuts. We wondered, do we even need,
what is going on?
Is this where we want to be? Is this guy going to be able to help us? And then I get it. And when they say I get it, there's almost a sadness in it. Like, the grieving of the old relationship, because like I said, it wasn't always bad, And so
I know
there's grief there.
Sure.
We should spend some time talking about the process of transitioning from from going from independent to codependent to interdependent. That'd be fun to do.
That'd be fun to do. Yeah. I know, lots of ideas. And we have clients who've given us other ideas too that we're working on.
Yeah.
Right. So.
Yeah. Anybody, and we're always.
We love new ideas.
I love it, so I don't have to come up with them. Please. If you have something you want us to talk about, or a question you want us to address, please post it. I can't make a promise that we will, but I definitely will entertain the idea if we can, because
you bet.
It's a lot of work to get that creative. And I'll be honest with you, I've ChatGPT'd, what are some great podcast topics? It comes up empty every time. Like, I'm just like, I don't like those.
AI is falling short,
I know.
Josh. Sometimes the
and
human
math.
connection and math.
Doesn't do math
as
very
we've
well.
learned, yes.
Okay, well, we need to let everybody go,
Wrap up.
and appreciate everybody tuning in. And just make sure you check out the show notes and subscribe to our channel and give us the review that we always ask for. And we'll see you back next time.